All right, let's dive into something that's happening literally all around us, but we barely ever think about it. We're going to pull back the curtain on the secret life of flowers, specifically how they reproduce.
So, here's what we've got lined up. First, we'll ask, what's a flower even for? Then we'll take a close-up look at the male and female parts. From there, it's all about how they get together, the spark of fertilization, and then the grand finale, how a flower turns into a fruit. It's going to be quite the journey.
Okay, first things first, let's get right to the heart of it. Why do plants even bother making flowers? I mean, they look nice, sure, but you might be surprised that looking pretty for us has almost nothing to do with their real job.
No, seriously, just think about that for a second. We spend so much time admiring them, right? We give them as gifts, we write poems about them. But what is their actual purpose? What's their biological endgame?
And this quote just nails it. It really gets to the core of the whole thing. All that stuff we love about flowers, the incredible colors, the wild shapes, those amazing smells, it's all, like the quote says, an aid to sexual reproduction. Think of them as super sophisticated, highly evolved tools all designed for one single mission.
And here's the basic blueprint of one of those tools. To a biologist, this isn't just something pretty to look at. Oh no, this is an absolute marvel of engineering. This whole structure is basically the plant's dedicated factory for making more plants. It's the exact spot where fruits and seeds get their start.
Okay, so to really get how this factory works, we gotta zoom in on the production line. Let's kick things off with the male parts. You could call it the pollen factory.
So what you're looking at here is the stamen. This is the whole male unit, right? It's got two parts. That long stalk, that's called the filament, and then perched right on top is the anther. Now that anther, that's the business end. That's our pollen factory.
So what if we crack that anther open and take a peek inside? Well, this is what you'd see. See those little chambers? Each one is a microsporangium, and they are just stuffed to the brim with tiny, developing pollen grains. We're talking about an incredibly efficient system for mass production here.
But how does a plant actually make all that pollen? Well, it's this really elegant, super precise process. It all starts with a special kind of cell division, meiosis, which makes these little clusters of 4. Then, those clusters grow up, mature into individual pollen grains, and just wait for the anther to split open and release them into the world. And the final product? It is so much more than just some yellow dust that makes you sneeze. I mean, look at this. Under a microscope, you can see these incredible, intricate structures. They're all different because each one is perfectly designed for its own special journey. These little grains are the male gametophytes. Basically, they're the tiny armored cars carrying the plant's precious male DNA.
All right, so we've got our pollen ready to go, but that's only half the equation, right? So now, let's flip over to the other side of the story. We need to check out the female parts to see where all this pollen is trying to get to.
And here it is. This is the pistil, the female reproductive structure. And it's got 3 key parts. Way up at the top, you've got the stigma. It's often sticky, making it the perfect landing pad for any pollen that happens to stop by. Then there's the long neck, called the style. And all the way at the bottom, you have the ovary. Now, tucked away safely inside that ovary is the ovule. You could think of this as the vault, the inner sanctum, because this is what's holding the precious female gamete, the egg cell. The whole setup is designed to keep this super important component safe. And you know, just like we saw with the pollen, there's a whole detailed process to get this egg cell ready for showtime. A single mother cell goes through a bunch of divisions, and what you end up with is something called the embryo sac. Now, this sac has a few cells in it, but the star of the show, the most important one, is the egg, the female gamete. And now, it's ready and waiting.
Okay, let's recap. We've got the pollen, all packed up and ready to ship, and we've got the egg, patiently waiting. So what's the big problem? Well, plants can't exactly get up and walk over to each other. So the next huge challenge is, how do you bridge that gap? And that brings us to the great pollen transfer. When it comes to this, plants have basically 2 main game plans. Some play it safe and pollinate themselves. It's called autogamy, and it guarantees they can reproduce even if they're all alone. But the real game changer, evolutionarily speaking, is cross-pollination. That's when you mix your genes with a totally different plant. That's how you get genetic diversity, which leads to stronger, more resilient kids. And since they're stuck in the ground, plants have to get creative. They basically hire couriers to move their pollen for them. Sometimes they use non-living things, what we call abiotic agents, like the wind or water. But more often, they recruit this massive army of living helpers, biotic agents. We're talking bees, moths, birds, bats.
Seriously, if an animal moves, chances are some plant somewhere has figured out how to use it as a pollen delivery service. And this is such a perfect example of how form follows function. Look at the plant on the left. It's pollinated by the wind. It doesn't need to be flashy, right? It just needs a big, feathery stigma that's good at catching any pollen drifting by. But the flower on the right? Oh, that's a whole different story. It needs to attract an insect, so it's basically a giant, colorful, fragrant billboard shouting, "Hey, over here!"
So, the pollen has made the journey. It's landed. The introductions are over, and now we get to the main event. This is the biological climax of the whole story, the actual moment of fertilization. As soon as the right kind of pollen lands on that sticky stigma, it kicks off this absolutely incredible race. The pollen grain springs to life and starts growing this teeny tiny tube. And this tube has to tunnel its way all the way down through the style, navigating perfectly to find the ovule so it can deliver its precious genetic cargo.
And this is where flowering plants do something just mind-blowing. It's a unique process called double fertilization. Get this, the pollen tube delivers 2 male gametes. The first one fuses with the egg cell, and that creates the zygote. That's the future baby plant, the embryo. But the second male gamete fuses with some other cells in the ovule to create something called the endosperm. And the endosperm is the food supply for the embryo. It is literally like packing a lunch for the baby at the exact same moment it's conceived. How cool is that?
So, that amazing moment of double fertilization sets off a whole chain reaction of changes. Let's pull the camera back out now and see what this all leads to on the macro level.
Okay, so once fertilization happens, the flower's work is basically done, and this massive transformation gets underway. The pretty petals, they just wither and fall off. The ovary starts to swell up, getting bigger and bigger as it matures into a fruit. And inside that fruit, every little ovule that got fertilized turns into a seed. And deep inside that seed, the tiny zygote grows into an embryo, all while munching on its packed lunch, the endosperm. And that's the whole story. This entire incredible process, from the flashy colors designed to attract a bee, all the way down to that microscopic journey of a pollen tube, it all leads to this, the fruit. It's the plant's brilliant way of packaging up its seeds, protecting them, and tricking animals into spreading them around. So really, the next time you bite into an apple or a berry, just